Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Special Education News and Noteworthy, where we bring you the news and noteworthy things happening in special education in the U.S. I'm Paige Fitzgerald.
And I'm Kate McGaldy. This week's stories focus on some of the biggest challenges and opportunities currently shaping special education. We're talking about teacher shortages, student safety, autism identification, individualized support, and what it really takes for students with disabilities to thrive both in and
And as always, we're looking at not just what's happening, but why it matters for students, families, educators, and school communities.
all right, let's jump in.
All right. All right. So, our first story this week comes from NPR, and it focuses on special education teachers using artificial intelligence to help manage growing paperwork demands. The article follows a California special education teacher who says that AI tools have helped reduce the amount of time she spends writing IEP goals, organizing data, and managing administrative tasks. Instead of arriving hours before school and staying late every day, she said she now has more time to actually work directly with her students. Researchers interviewed in the article noted that many special education teachers are experiencing burnout tied to paperwork demands, staffing shortages, and increasing caseloads. At the same time, experts also raised important concerns about student privacy, bias, and making sure IEPs remain truly individualized and not overly dependent on technology. Okay.
So much
Um,
to talk about this. Mixed feelings.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I obviously we're both no longer in the classroom anymore, but I still remember staying until sometimes 8 o'clock at night and getting kicked out by the custodial staff because I was, laminating things, cutting things out. I was doing the IEPs and it was a lot. It was a lot. So I do get the need for some support with that paperwork, but I think, like you said, it's a mixed feeling because there are privacy issues, and you run the risk of yeah, I think especially, like, for the present levels of performance, those are the things that you should be writing yourself, in my opinion, um, because only you know your student that well, and you're really writing a narrative about your student, but, are there other things if they're using really secure, made for school platforms that integrate AI that they could possibly do for paperwork?
Right. I
Probably.
think it's helpful for, organization and brainstorming, but I still want a human relationship to drive everything part of this, driving the IEP. And I also, something that I thought of, and that I've, as a special education teacher, that I thought of many times is like the amount of paperwork that we actually spend doing and how that's taking time away from direct student support and how like if there was like a simpler way of doing things. So I do get that aspect of using AI, but to your point, the confidentiality is a huge issue, and it's so personalized when you know the student and you're doing it yourself.
Yeah.
So
But I also look at it as, you know, t it's not taking away from teachers' time in the classroom because 'cause you're not doing the paperwork in the classroom anyway, so it doesn't really I mean, yes, burnout-wise, if you're taking a lot of it home, then yes,
okay,
but it's not really taking away from your time with the student, but yeah, for burnout, absolutely, it's more of a work-life balance if you're doing that, and I would be worried about teachers putting sensitive information into something like ChatGPT or Claude. Um, I was just reading something online that wasn't special education related, but it was some motivational speaker was giving advice for people to put all of their financial information into like a chat GPT to almost like instead of like a financial advisor, use chat GPT. And they're like, hold on, like if there was a hack in ChatGPT, you now have given your entire financial like bank account numbers, this, that. And I look at it, same thing, right? If you're putting in your students' sensitive information in there and there is a hack, a leak, there's it's
yeah,
it's a big, big problem. So I think mixed
that
feelings.
purpose, I think it's a bad idea. I think ChatGPT and Claude can be really helpful with tweaking things, or helping to organize things, but not for confidential information. It's a huge no-no in the special education world. And, I think special education is really, you know, something that people talk about with burnout all the time, and that people are just looking for anything and everything to help reduce that pressure. Maybe there's an easier answer than using ChatGPT or any type of AI to help you.
Yeah.
All right, so our second story comes from News 12 and covers an active investigation involving a nonverbal student at a special education school in New York. Police are investigating allegations that a teacher's aide sexually assaulted a 14-year-old nonverbal student at the Jesse Kaplan School in Rockland County. So, according to those reports, another staff member allegedly witnessed the incident and notified authorities, and the employee has been since placed on leave while the investigation continues. The student's mother, says her daughter has been since removed from the school and is now being homeschooled while the family pursues therapy and trauma counseling. She's also advocating for cameras in classrooms, serving nonverbal students, saying families need stronger protections and greater transparency. We talked about this on our last podcast. There's such a need for this, and it's the growing number of parents that are actually stepping up and advocating for cameras in the classroom so that they can actually see what's going on for their nonverbal kiddos. Is something that we really need to look into on a greater level.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I
It's tough.
think this is there's like a wave coming out of all the parents really being like, this is something that can't go unanswered, this request for long. Even just in my own community, there was a petition that was started, I think last week, and it has, I think, over 1,000 signatures already
Yeah.
because of a separate incident that happened. And they're like, there should be cameras in the classroom. And for that one, I think they were saying if there's any student that is nonverbal or emerging verbal, that there should be cameras.
I mean, listen, nonverbal are often the most vulnerable, but this is like for any child, to be able to articulate what's going on and when somebody's being mistreated. It's not the first and it's not going to be the last case that we hear of this. So I think families do deserve full transparency and reassurance that their children are safe in schools. The end. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I'm sure that if this were to eventually be where it is all self-contained classrooms have camera, it would just feel like the norm. Like we don't blink
Right.
twice when we hear that a daycare has cameras,
Right.
right? And obviously huge differences between daycares and schools, but vulnerable populations there,
Right.
right? If a student is injured or like self-injurious or becomes injured, those younger students aren't capable of explaining what happens, and it's there to protect everyone in the room,
Right.
right? And we
Talked
have
about this
vulnerable
last week.
populations. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Last week on the podcast, we talked about trust, like
Mhm.
having full trust with the school. When your child is not able to communicate these things with you, it's about feeling like you can actually trust the administration and the teachers, the paraprofessionals, everybody that's encountering your child to make sure that they are safe.
Absolutely. So look forward to the day when it's just the norm
Norm. Yep. Agreed.
and these conversations don't even have to happen anymore.
Right. Right.
Our third story comes from theconversation.com, and it focuses on new research published in the journal Autism, examining disparities in autism identification in elementary schools across the United States. Researchers found that Black students, Hispanic students, girls, multilingual learners, and students from low income families were significantly less likely to be identified with autism compared to their peers, even when attending the same schools and demonstrating similar academic performance. One of the most striking findings was the gender gap. Researchers found that for every 10 boys identified with autism, only about 2 similarly situated girls were identified. This study raises important questions about how autism is recognized in different students and how stereotypes, bias, and differences in presentation might contribute to some children being overlooked or identified much later than others. And I will say it says in this article that for students with disabilities who are receiving special education supports and services and being identified earlier, that they actually have higher rates of graduation, and they have higher achievement levels than those that are later identified. So I think this is something that they're continuing to look into for. They're doing more studies, and I think it's something that, yeah, should be looked into because the sooner, as we know, the sooner a child gets support, the better their outcomes are. That's why early intervention exists.
Right. And I think the awareness specifically that girls are often overlooked because they don't fit the certain stereotypes, I think it really comes down to something that we've heard time and time again, that autism does not present in the same way for every child. There's a reason why it's called the spectrum. There's such a difference in characteristics that what is so common with boys that might not be the same for girls, and that's why things are being overlooked. So I think it's just reiterating that autism is presented in such different ways, and just having that awareness that girls might be overlooked, and just seeing some patterns of behavior that might be different than typical children. So
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, let's see, story number 4. Our fourth story is from um, the 74million.org, and it looks at a Michigan initiative called Talent Together, which is helping paraprofessionals and other school staff become certified teachers while continuing to work in their districts. The program was created to help address teacher shortages, including shortages in special education, by removing financial and scheduling barriers that often prevent people from pursuing teaching degrees. Participants receive tuition support, paid apprenticeships, mentorship, and classroom experience while earning their certifications. Many participants already worked in the schools as paraprofessionals or support staff before entering the program. The story highlights something that many schools and families already know well. Paraprofessionals often build incredibly strong relationships with students and bring valuable classroom experience that can translate into excellent teaching. I just thought this was such a feel good story because I honestly love seeing anything that can give those paraprofessionals a chance, because those are the people that I have just encountered and witnessed and observed over the years, as like their heart is in it, and whatever barriers are preventing them from going to that next level, it's helping them to achieve that. So I just think that they're so they're some of the strongest educators I've worked with, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I actually went through a similar, certification program like this as I became a special education teacher. So it was the New York City Teaching Fellows. It was a little bit different because with this program, I believe they support you in getting a bachelor's degree in education. So with the Teaching Fellows, you had to already have a bachelor's in any field, didn't have to be related to teaching, and they essentially paid for about, I think, 80 to 90% of your master's program. And the same thing, it was, you did a paid training over the summer, and then you got to teach while you were earning your master's, while you were working towards your certification. And it was a really great program for career changers, and it staffed most of the highest need classrooms throughout New York City. I remember there was an additional tuition stipend, or whatever you would call that if you taught in the Bronx, which I did teach in the Bronx. So it was a really great program, but I love the idea of opening it up to people that are working towards their bachelor's too, and just getting your bachelor's in education. And because I think like you said, I mean, obviously some paras do have bachelor's degrees already. So maybe it would be a program where they kind of meet you where you're at, where not only if you have a bachelor's, but if you're working towards a bachelor's, they can do that program in New York. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic. Because I don't know if that's something that we have in New York.
yeah,
But
I
I
think
think
it's
it's great.
awesome.
I think every state should have something like this because it incentivizes the people that already care, right? That already have knowledge of the special education classrooms, and you're just going to get stronger staff that's probably going to stick around longer too.
You got it. And they already know the students incredibly well, so it's just an added benefit.
Yeah,
And
and
the
mhm,
flexibility and the financial support that they can receive through this is just incredible. So,
yeah.
um,
And even the teachers that have those paraprofessionals that are training in their classroom, I believe they also receive a stipend. So there's incentive for other classroom teachers to participate, which is fantastic because you're incentivizing everyone just to make sure it's a really great program.
it's a win-win.
Yeah. All right. So our final story comes from PBS, and it focuses on Mansfield Hall, which is a specialized college housing program supporting neurodiverse students attending college in Wisconsin and other locations in the U.S. The program provides students with support not only academically, but also with executive functioning, organization, social skills, independent living, cooking, medication management, and transitioning toward adulthood. Students in the program attend nearby colleges and universities while living in a supportive residential environment that helps them build confidence and independence. One of the most important things this story highlights is that success after high school often depends on more than academic alone. Many students still benefit from support systems that help them navigate routines, self advocacy, relationships, and everyday life skills alongside their coursework. I think this is something that is a really interesting program. I liked the idea that you don't apply to the colleges, the students that are there, you apply to this particular program. And then through that program, you're already approved to take courses, whether that be in a 4 year college, in a community college, whatever really just fits that student. And it's just, okay, if you're accepted into this supportive dorm housing thing, that you get all of those supports. And that includes supports, managing your class load schedule. Like it said, that living independent, I think that's so great for so many students that fall into that in between of, okay, wanting to go to college and able to manage the coursework, but still needing supports in order for college to be a positive experience for them. Kind of like that other story. The more supports that we get
Mhm.
for the kiddos that need it, the better the outcomes. And this is just a kind of
Yeah,
nicely wraps it in a bow, I think, of like supportive, good outcomes.
I love it. And it just goes to show like what inclusive support can really look like after the K-12. I have a dear friend here in town whose daughter just went to a similar type program. And I mean, the joy that this mom feels saying, my daughter is in college, because she's in academics from 9 to 3, but there's a lot of life skills, but it also promotes a lot of independence. And she's there and she's having this experience like a typical um, college kiddo. And, she's away from home. She's not living at home. It just, makes me think of my dear friend here and how happy she is, but also how successful her daughter is at a program like this. It was a huge decision that the family had to make, and she's hours away from home. And they recently went down to visit her for like, I think it was like a not orient, like parent weekend or something, like a typical thing that a college would have. And it was, they took her out of the environment for a little bit, and just that transition out and how it just showed how the structured support of that school was so incredible, and helped her transitions. And like it was just a safe place for her. She just feels like she's benefiting from it socially, academically, and the family is able to go down and catch up with her and meet with her, and then they go back home and live their life, and they FaceTime the daughter. And it's awesome. It just makes me feel so great. So if you hear anything about programs like this, we'd be willing to hear more about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always do. I know we're going to talk about this a little in our closing, but we always have two picks of the week in our newsletter version of this. So in our digital edition, where we share resources for parents that we find all over the place. So we're always looking to hear some great picks of the weeks for the future that can help families in any stage of their journey.
Yeah. So I think that is it for this episode of Special Education News and Noteworthy.
And if you'd like to dive deeper, this week's newsletter, which we just spoke about, also includes our special education insight on what truly makes an IEP individualized. We felt like it really tied in with this week's news stories, especially about AI being intentionally or not integrated into some aspects of school. There's also our picks of the week, which are focused on accessibility, inclusion, and parent advocacy. We've got a really, really cool one that I'm so excited to share. I was even sharing it on my local mom groups about a sensory friendly movie experience at a really popular movie chain. And we've also got a little more information on our own parent training that we are launching this summer called From Parent to Advocate. And if you're in our newsletter, you will get all of that information.
Yep. So you can subscribe to our newsletter, and you can also follow the podcast on Spotify to stay connected each week.
As
Um,
always, thank you so much for being here and continuing to advocate for inclusive, supportive environments for students with disabilities. It's so important for us to all be informed Special education in the US is changing rapidly, and it is important to know what is going on, even if it's something outside of your state, because patterns emerge, it all connects somehow.
That's right. So until next time, stay vocal, stay hopeful, and take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.